So I'd love to welcome you to our monthly Spark Talk. My name is Lisa Blue, and I'm the Director of Artificial Intelligence Strategies here at Eastern Kentucky University. Through the Spark Talks, I hope to demystify generative AI while sparking conversations that inspire innovative teaching and learning strategies in higher education. We are very glad you're here today. Each month, we'll share insights and practical strategies for integrating GenAI into your teaching, research, and service obligations. My goal is to enrich your teaching methods, empower our students, and promote the ethical, responsible use of AI while preparing students for the tech-driven job market they'll face post-graduation. Today, I'm joined by Dan Royalty, our Assistant Director of Student Conduct and Community Standards, and we want this to be as useful as possible to each of you. So if at any point you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on that, or feel free to raise your hand. When I'm speaking, Dan will be keeping an eye on the chat and vice versa. So with that, let's go ahead and get started today.
So let's kick off this talk. As Lisa introduced me, I'm Dan Royalty. I serve as Assistant Director of Student Conduct and Community Standards here at EKU. And I really just wanted to get a pulse from the room, introductory poll. What is one word or phrase that reflects your initial thoughts on GenAI's impact on student learning?
And please feel free to just answer that first question. For some reason, both of my questions popped up at the same time. So just the first one.
Mine would be concern.
Sure. And again, don't feel like you need to answer that second question. So Ryan's got concern. See, we've got about 55 people on the call right now, and we've got about 28 answers. So what is one word or phrase that reflects your initial thoughts about GenAI's impact on student learning? Always had to qualify that whenever I did this in front of my general chemistry classes and warn students, hey, if I have to Google this and I wind up on Urban Dictionary, you and I, we're going to have a talk. All right. I will give this just a few more seconds. So what's one word or phrase? Don't worry about that second question. It was supposed to pop up second later in our presentation. All right, I'm going to end this poll in 3, 2, and 1. All right, and sharing the results. Let's see. Let me grab the details here. And of course, my computer is going to be super slow because it decided Windows 11 needed to update today. Goodness. All right, so this isn't working so great. Give me just a second. No, that's not going to work either. Okay, so if anybody wants to unmute or just drop it in the chat, what did you think? What's one word or phrase that reflects your initial thoughts? Uncertainty, re-educate, potential, bad, disruption, confusing, ooh, opportunity. Okay. Creative brainstorming, double-edged sword, earthquake, complicated, hurtful, promising but challenging, mixed, potential for augmenting learning and harming it, lack of investment, educate, fear of misinformation and misunderstanding, exciting and concerning, mixed feelings, hopeful. I saw loss of critical thinking before it ticked by, and students aren't doing the work they need to learn. These are all very valid feelings. So powerful, let's see what else. I second loss of critical thinking. Yeah, we've got to safeguard against that. And how are we going to do that? Did somebody unmute and want to add? Okay, if not, let's go ahead. All right. So when we're thinking about, wait a second, we skipped this. No, we're on track here. All right. So when we're talking about over-reliance, I think we have to really stop and think about where are we at in terms of the words that we're using, because most of the time when I get these frantic phone calls from faculty, they say, hey, my student cheated with AI, or my student plagiarized with AI. And I think plagiarism is the word that I hear the most often. And I don't know that plagiarism is the right word for using GenAI to complete assignments. And our classic definition of plagiarism is taking the work of someone else and representing it as your own. And I think we really need to hone in on that definition, because AI is not a someone. All right. It wants to be a someone. We're hoping to get to AGI eventually, but truly what we're seeing is that AI is not a person. There's no author to steal from. Using this term can misclassify the behavior. And Sharon points out neither is an internet web page. And I've heard that argument as well. I think this gets into some transparency issues, because I think it's important that we as faculty, but also our students, disclose when AI has been used to create something. But calling it citing the AI, it's not a person. It didn't contribute something new to our body of knowledge. It's merely reproducing from the body of knowledge it's been trained on. Sharon adds also Wikipedia. And Dan, if you want to chime in at any time, feel free. So rather than saying that my student plagiarized with AI, I think perhaps we should use some different terms. So the first term I would offer is cheating. Cheating, of course, that definition is rock solid, acting dishonestly to gain advantage. So here we're really focusing on the intent. And I think this applies when students knowingly use AI against clear rules. All right, but the intent must be established. And I'm seeing this in a lot of courses where students are using AI on an assignment, even though AI has been completely forbidden in the class. And anytime this happens, I always back the instructor up and say, okay, what's your syllabus say about AI? Let's start there, because it starts with clear policy. And if the intent was there and they just ignored it and the policy was clear, which we'll talk more about policy in a minute, then yeah, this may have crossed a boundary and gone into cheating. I think a lot of times, though, what we're really seeing is over-reliance with the AI tools. There are these fantastic new opportunities to cognitively offload the things that are hard. And we all know that learning is challenging. If it were easy, everybody would do it, but not everybody is pursuing a degree in higher education. And so with over-reliance, when we see students using AI to answer discussion board posts or to craft their introductory statements, hi, I'm in bio 111. My name is Lisa, and I'm here because. All right. Why are students using it for these low stakes assessments? And what I'm seeing is that a lot of times, and this is backed up by literature, over-reliance often signals that we have low AI literacy, or perhaps unclear boundaries within the assignment or the syllabus. Low AI literacy, because until students understand how generative AI works, they are likely to trust it implicitly. They're often conflating generative AI technologies with Googling something. When you Google something, you get websites, and those websites lead to things you can read, and hopefully they lead to peer-reviewed journal articles that can back up what is being said. And students don't understand that the generative AI technologies are statistical text predictors. And as such, they are not bound by truth. Probability and truth are mutually exclusive of one another. And so students don't understand that they have to look at the output from the Gen AI and they have to ask themselves, is this factually accurate? Is this free from bias? Is this perpetuating any potential bias? Is this perpetuating any omissions in the training data set? There are gaps of knowledge in the internet, which is basically how most of these AIs have been trained. So I would argue that this is also a teachable moment, though. Dan and I have had extensive conversations about AI cases winding up on his desk in student conduct and, hey, could we have stopped this earlier? And so a lot of what we're hoping to convey to you today are better ways to handle this so we don't have to escalate this. All right. So a couple of questions here. You will be getting the slides. I will be sharing a link a little bit later in the presentation when I know we've got more people on board. There'll be a link to the slides and to a couple of resources. Irina also mentioned scrolling down in Google search because the first thing you get now is an AI summary. Agreed. All right. Now, another term that I'd like to offer up that may be a better word than plagiarism would be simple AI misuse. Maybe the student thought they'd be clever and use GenAI. And using a tool inappropriately, even if no dishonesty was intended, maybe they were just trying to get some additional insights. This might be a good term because it's generally neutral and it allows some room for nuance. And so if we're in a position where we don't have a global institutional recommendation for an AI policy, or if you're still sorting out the AI policies for your own particular course, maybe your AI policies need to differ from course to course. Maybe in a lower level course, you're really working with students to develop their author's voice and to make sure they clearly understand the rules of grammar. And in that lower level course, not using AI would be more appropriate. But then once we've got those ground skills, those foundational skills well in hand, maybe in an upper division course, it does make sense to use the AI. But maybe a student hears from an upperclassman, oh, hey, we use AI in my junior level class all the time. Why wouldn't you use it in your class? Oh, okay. maybe we need to work on that. So I would offer up cheating, over-reliance, and misuse as potentially better terms than plagiarism. So we have to ask ourselves, why are these students over-relying on the AI? And truly, cognitively offloading assignments is not a new problem. We've had this problem ever since there was another student you could pay off to write your paper, ever since there was Chegg, ever since there was all the ways to get a little additional assistance on your paper or your homework assignment that wasn't strictly sanctioned by the course. And so just briefly thinking about these different student groups, in addition to those with the low AI literacy, perhaps we're dealing with first-year students. And these first-year college students are coming in, they're realizing that maybe they're not tops in their class anymore, and there's a lot of really smart people surrounding them. So with that low academic confidence comes a high level of anxiety. And maybe they come in also with weak study skills. I know my first year of undergraduate college, I had an honors botany professor, and he said, okay, you all are honors students, but what got you here is not going to get you through. And so we spent like our first 2 class periods talking about study skills. For students that don't have that fortunate first year experience, it could become that AI is that crutch they use before they really develop those effective study skills. Another group that's truly at risk are our international students or our English as a second language students. And I see Andy's on the call today. I'm sure you can definitely speak to this as an expert in this arena. Our international students and my international faculty are using AI as a translator, an editor, and a grammar checker, which I think is a fantastic use of the AI, especially if they're using one that is more nuanced in that field. I'm hearing some pushback from my language instructors saying that maybe the regular LLMs like ChatGPT or Claude are not the best for translations. But if you're dealing with an AI that's specific to translations, this is a fantastic opportunity. And if I were trying to make my way in a country where I did not speak the native language, I would do this as well. For our students, you might be trying to meet native speaker proficiency, or maybe you're trying to sound more academic. These are all considerations. Irina, you have so many great comments. Google Translator's only a start, and you have to reread what Grammarly, Microsoft Editor, or Quillbot will write. All right. Our neurodiverse students may also become susceptible to this over-reliance because I know with my own son and his ADHD, he has task analysis paralysis, and just getting started is the hardest part for him. So maybe dropping the instructions for an assignment into an AI would be a good way to get through that paralysis and actually get started on the assessment or the assignment in front of him. Our overextended students are another very at-risk group. At Eastern Kentucky University, we're a commuter college. And so we've got students that are working to support themselves while they go to college. We have a significant non-traditional student population. We've got students that are taking care of children, taking care of parents, and they're juggling all the things, also while trying to remain a full-time student with good academic standing. So it only makes sense if we're working, parenting, and commuting, we're trying to find ways to save time. And so GenAI may be a way to do that, especially if policies aren't clear. Another one, and this is one that I've seen personally as a former chemistry instructor. If you've got a STEM student taking a humanities course because it's required by their gen ed, they may perceive low value in that course. And the same is true of humanities students trying to suffer through a STEM course to satisfy a gen ed requirement. If they have that low perceived value, then they're going to do what they need to do to get through that course, especially if they don't feel like it's adding value to their major or their future career choice. And Jessica points out, we've seen that our high achieving students have a tendency now to misuse AI technology to perfect their work or do more in less time. Yeah, that's me too. I would absolutely be there. And on the flip side of that, we have to worry about our low performing students, because if they habitually perform poorly, have they learned helplessness? Do they have this fear of failure? Or are they in that particular student group who just maybe doesn't understand why they're in college yet and how college works, and so they're just looking for any way to game the system? We see that students in 5th grade switch from learning to read to reading to learn. We see another significant shift in learning when students matriculate from high school into college. I used to teach college freshmen, and all of the time I would hear up and down the halls, Professor so-and-so expects me to teach myself. Why am I even paying this person tuition money? And it's like, oh, dear one, you've got to understand that in college, we're teaching you to be lifelong learners, and we can't teach you all the things in those maybe 3 contact hours we have face-to-face every week. The onus of the learning needs to be on the student. And Irina points out, none of this is new. And if the stakes are high, such as a scholarship, and they're stuck in a STEM or humanities course and no choice, or a professor who's condescending or worse, of course they're going to offload this. So yeah, these are not new problems. It's not just limited to our students, though. In a now often quoted study. Ethan Mollick talks about this on his blog, and I've got the link to the paper here at the bottom of this slide. Between the Harvard and Wharton Schools of Business, they conducted this study using elite consultants from a Boston consulting firm, or maybe it was called the Boston Consulting Firm. But they divided these consultants into 3 groups: a control condition that did not use AI, another group that used GenAI, and they were given no instructions, and another group, a third group in green here, that was allowed to use generative AI to accomplish a consulting task, but they were also given an overview session warning them that the task they had been given was perhaps outside of the capabilities of what the AI at the time was able to accomplish. When we are straying outside of what's capable with AI, we're increasing our risk of hallucinations or factually incorrect output being generated, because ultimately the goal of the Gen AI is to produce content for the user, even if that means that it's fabricating information or fabricating sources. So despite being warned of this, when these 3 groups were given this consulting task, we see that this challenging task in the control condition without any AI, the consultants got an 85% correctness score. For those people in the Gen AI use plus the warning session telling them, hey, this might be outside of what AI can do, they saw a drop in their correctness down to about 71%. For the Gen AI use without that warning, though, we see that their correctness dropped to a flat 60%. And that's because when you get a tool and that tool proves to be really useful, we kind of get lulled into a false sense of security. And so rather than continually mistrusting the output and checking it for factual accuracy, and is this reflecting omissions or errors in the data set? Is this perpetuating bias? We just trust the output and run with it. So even these elite consultants that should have known better fall prey to over-reliance. So it's not just our students. All right, so this one, I'm not going to launch a poll. I want you to drop in the chat, what is the first step you take or have taken when you suspect a student has used Gen AI when it was not allowed? So what's the first step you take or have taken when you suspect a student has used Gen AI even though it was not allowed? Just drop that in the chat. All right, I'm seeing some comments rolling in. I'm seeing consultation with the students. Yes, that gets a thumbs up. Ask them about it. Another thumbs up. Conference to discuss process and understanding. Sharon, you get all the thumbs up. Lynn, talk to them one-on-one. Min, talk to student to ask about their working and thinking process. Yes, let's start focusing on that process. Question the student to see if they tell the truth. I can tell most of the time. Good for you, Donna. Open a conversation. Thank you, Andy. That's my favorite answer among process. Looking back, should have spoken with student, but instead I used ChatGPT 0. Ryan, fair. We'll talk about that. Score them lower on my grading rubric and provide explanation of what to do differently next time. Ask the students, private conversation, email students, ask the student why. Ask for permalinks to their sources. Oh, that's a good one, because a lot of times students don't check the links to make sure they go to actual articles. Ask them to meet to talk about their work because it sounds different from their regular voice. Hold an exploratory meeting to learn more with the student about their work. Reflect on the assignment task and context to see if there are any changes that can be made to better support students in completing the task appropriately. Hannah, you also get all the thumbs up. Matthew says assign a 0, indicate characteristics of AI writing, request a meeting to discuss. Let's see, try to figure out what about the assignment is the hang up for the student. Oh, that's a good one as well. What drove them to use AI in the first place? All right, review course policy and talk to the student. These are all fantastic. Double check references to see if they're real, then look for patterns of unusual words. Yes, ChatGPT loves moreover, it loves to delve. It has, I actually saw a list of phrases that somebody published that are tells for ChatGPT. Check comprehension on what they wrote. Yes, interrogating their process, essentially. Require working hyperlinks in an online course, failing grade and feedback given, inappropriate use of AI, consult with me for clarification and to redo the assignment. These are all fantastic. Thank you for volunteering that information. So not only is it really important to make sure that we're getting our language right, notice in this particular headline, this is from Massachusetts last October. Parents sue son's high school history teacher over AI cheating punishment. And notice the subtitle, the legal complaint said using AI to assist in crafting an outline didn't violate school rules at the time. All right, so that's our first flag. We've got to have a clear policy in place. But notice that the attorney's comment was that AI is not plagiarism. AI is an output from a machine. So that was it sounds like their main defense. And so even if we don't agree with those definitions of plagiarism, misuse, cheating that I supplied, it's really important that we decide what our definition of those terms is in light of what generative AI can do. And then we communicate our interpretations of those definitions to our students so that they understand where we're coming from. Because we all want to avoid being a headline in the news when it comes to Gen AI and punishments. And so that goes back again to, do you have an AI policy and does it hit these checklist items? So if you do not mention AI in your syllabus, students are going to think sky's the limit. Hey, they didn't say anything about it, so they didn't say no. If you do have an AI policy, and I've seen a lot of courses that have AI policies, but maybe it leaves a little bit too much room for interpretation. I had one that used Grammarly as an example, and it said, using Grammarly to check grammar is acceptable, but if you're using Grammarly to change your words, it is not. And I'm like, oh, isn't that the point of checking your grammar, is to change your words so you're using proper grammar? It was confusing to me, so I can see how it was confusing to the students. Is your policy consistent? Is it enforced? And students really need to know what counts as over-reliance. And so if we're going down our policy checklist, and this is indeed a talk for a whole different day, you really want to start with the why. It's one thing to say AI is forbidden, or AI is allowed on some assignments, or AI is allowed on most assignments. But I think it's really important, in the spirit of transparency and engagement, to explain why you care. Why are you taking this stance? What are you hoping to accomplish with taking this stance? And share with them, maybe it's a learning goal. Maybe you are hoping that students learn how to construct a research essay to get those foundational skills, because later on you want them to be able to focus on something else. A key goal of this class is learning how to write a research paper. And if we're not achieving those goals because we're offloading it to AI, then we're kind of missing the point here. Sharon points out many students have Grammarly running in their composition environment, shoving alternate wording at them. Passive acceptance doesn't feel like cheating. I agree. Word and Google Documents, and even, whenever I'm texting people, the AIs are in there running in the background, suggesting word choices. And that's why I think we're really leaving the era of where we can say AI is not acceptable. And we're really in the era now where we have to create assignments that are all AI aware. That being said, I think we also have to clearly define what acceptable versus unacceptable AI use looks like, and do so using lots of concrete examples, especially examples that are relevant in particular to your course, because maybe you're hoping for some nuance there and the student is missing it, because I'm seeing a lot of students who don't want to touch AI because they're getting this consistent messaging in high school that AI is cheating, AI is bad, I shouldn't use AI. I also have students who are conscientious objectors because they're concerned about how AI is damaging the environment and the energy concerns. And so maybe they've never touched AI, and maybe they have no idea of the output. Maybe they have no idea of the other downfalls of it. Um, Matthew, yes. In my experience, the fatal flaw with any AI policy is that students have to read it. That is absolutely spot on. And that's why Dan will talk about how we get this information across. I think it helps to always reiterate the policy. I love having a boilerplate statement in the syllabus that you then copy to every assignment where AI will be utilized. And in this boilerplate statement, the student simply says, I used these AI tools, fill in the blank, to accomplish these tasks, fill in the blank. They can describe how it's either helped what they were trying to accomplish or hindered it. But at the end, we need to include an affirmation statement where the student affirms that the final product they are submitting for grading reflects their own creativity, their own cognitive abilities and critical thought, and to the best of their knowledge represents factually accurate output that is free from bias and error. Make a podcast with Notebook LM. Yes, or a mind map. They make mind maps now. I'm hearing lots about that. And Jessica points out, I've told several students that AI can be helpful when completing tasks you have the ability to do on your own, but need to save time. It should be rarely used when you're still in the process of learning something new. And that's an excellent point, Jessica, because when I'm explaining to people how to get started with AI, I always advise them to try at least 2 platforms, preferably 3 or 4, just to compare the outputs. But when they're experimenting with AI for the first time, to use prompts that reflect information you're trying to generate where you're already an expert in the domain. So for me, that means I want the AI to generate a full year of student learning outcomes for both a General Chemistry 1 and General Chemistry 2 course appropriate to a freshman college student. And then I can go through that because I've taught General Chemistry 100 times by now. And I can say, yeah, that works, that works. No, we always scrap that. They must have stolen this from an OpenStax textbook, you know. And I can very quickly ascertain which AI is better or performs more poorly because I'm already a domain expert. And that's another limiting factor for our students, is that they do not have that domain expertise in the area where we're teaching them. That's the ultimate goal, is we convey that we help them develop their expertise in that area. And that's another reason why I think students are so susceptible, because it makes all the pretty words, but it may be lacking in content. All right. So with that being said.
Okay. Dan here again. Nice to see everybody.
And Dan, we do have a quick question here.
Sure.
Esther was asking, could you provide an example of a written policy that meets the policy checklist? I will drop that in our resource folder after the call, and I'll drop a link to that. And then Ryan asked, what are the AIs that you would recommend for professors, academics? Ryan, I would absolutely recommend that you start with one of the 4 major large language learning models. I would start with free ChatGPT, free Gemini, free Claude, and also free Copilot. Here at Eastern Kentucky University, we do not have Copilot turned on in the Microsoft Office suite, but you can access it online through what was formerly the Bing search. So just go to a Microsoft search and you can access Copilot that way. And perplexity. So perplexity is also a fantastic one, but perplexity is more geared towards finding information for you. So it's more trending towards a research tool. Napkin AI is also another fantastic one. So I'll let Dan talk about AI detectors, and I'll drop some links in the chat for you all.
Yeah, and a quick aside, think about also note-taking policies using AI platforms. I have noticed some issues arising out of that too, where students are alleged to have academic integrity violations because they used the AI to generate their notes that they wrote in class. But as we move away from policy discussions, let's discuss AI detectors. Oh, wait. Lisa, did I take the AI detector slide, or was that you? I didn't want to step on your
Either way
toes.
is fine.
Okay,
You're
I'm happy
good.
to talk about them.
Sure.
Okay, so AI detectors, I have mixed feelings, and I think you should too as faculty members. I think as a helpful tool, one little tiny tool in our tool chest of things to use to assess academic integrity and academic dishonesty, they're helpful. But that's with a caveat. There's a lot of problems with them. One of the biggest issues are they're not very fair for non-native English speakers or people that speak in vernacular derivations of English, such as Black English, and even students with learning disabilities. These AI detectors may actually flag a lot of this material as this could possibly be AI written, just due to the unnatural flow of the writing. So I think false positives are a big thing to consider when we're using these AI detectors. Secondly, there's a lot of apps out there that can humanize text very quickly, very easily. It will run it through some sort of system, reword it to make it look more natural. So there's ways that they can skirt the AI detectors and the AI detector won't pick it up. I think also there's a lot of third-party AI detectors, tons of them. When I get an incident report from one of our faculty members, oftentimes it's all different kinds of AI detectors. A lot of these institutions don't have a set AI detector, a trusted AI detector. What I would recommend is that if you are going to utilize AI detectors, which is perfectly okay, your institution, your department needs to come on some sort of consensus as to which tool you're going to use. Also, there's a lot of just random AI checkers out there. I would not trust uploading a student-written paper, particularly with personally identifiable information, into one of those AI checkers. I don't think that's a very good idea. We don't know what is being done with that data, so we have to be careful of that. Now, as I said, we want to align with institutional departmental policies. We want to use it as one piece of the evidence. I don't know about you, but I think it's weird that we use AI to catch AI. It just makes me feel odd to stand behind an AI checker, and I don't know where it came from, who made it, who assembled it, how it was trained, and a faculty member is saying, look, this thing says the student cheated. I have trouble putting a lot of stock into that. What I do put a lot of stock into is an instructor's spider sense, their knowing of what looks wrong and what doesn't look right with their students. So we don't want to use non-procured detectors. You want to use a detector that is built into your, whether you're using Blackboard or Canvas, whatever you're using for your content management, be sure it's tied through that. Best case scenario. Oh,
Yeah,
what
this one, this is one I'm really passionate about because after updating our IT acceptable use policy to reference our AI acceptable use policy that we're trying to get in place for the university, if we don't have a contract with an AI, then we're just throwing our students' data out there. And I'm really not comfortable with that. And I know a lot of people use ChatGPT Zero or any of the various AI detectors out there. And I'm just not okay with putting our students' data out there. So that's the hill I'm dying on today. But yeah, the best case scenario, Dan.
Ideally, I mean, let's design a course where we won't need to utilize AI detection if that's possible. And we'll talk about that a little bit.
So Dan, now that we've taken the AI detectors away, what should we do?
If we don't have an AI detector, how do we know? What is the litmus test for potential dishonesty? And let me reframe this. It's not, I don't even think we should look at it as necessarily dishonesty anymore, particularly with a new and emergent technology, before we have adequate opportunity to train our students so that they know what's appropriate versus inappropriate. But how do we know? Inability to explain work. What they submitted, they understand it, they get it, but when you speak with them, it's like talking to a brick wall. I think that's a really good indicator. Oftentimes at like appeal hearings, the student doesn't know the course material, even though the submitted work is excellent and touches so many great topics. Superficial understanding of topics where AI use is not permitted. And I have even seen scenarios where an instructor will cite the student or will cite the faculty member, but then not even know their faculty member's name. There was a recent case where a student cited their instructor, and while the instructor was speaking with them, the student had no idea that they had cited their own instructor in the paper. Submitted work oftentimes will seem irrelevant or off topic. I mean, one of the parts of a masterful use of AI is knowing what to prompt it with so that you can get what is needed. And oftentimes, if you give a very vague prompt to an AI, it's going to just throw out something. So I think if what the student submits is broad, overly broad, and a lot of learning outcomes aren't met within what they produce, should put your sensors off. A personal voice is lacking. I think from day one in the class, we need to get some samplings, little micro samplings of a student's writing. We need to familiarize ourselves with it because at the end of the day, I think we can all tell if we're familiar with our students. I know that can be somewhat challenging at times, but if a personal voice is lacking, if it's without that spark, that spirit, I think that's a big tell as well.
Dan, we've got a great question in the chat. Christopher asks, is it fair to demand students to verbally explain their work in order to defend its originality, authenticity, when oral exam is not part of the original assessment?
I think that's, I think it is fair. I think sharing that vocally with your instructor is a part of that classroom educational atmosphere. But I think we have to be very careful when we have that conversation, when we're asking for that explanation. We don't need to turn it into a game of gotcha. We don't need to have a high heat lamp in front of their face and water just out of reach. We need to offer a very comfortable atmosphere and one in which they're willing to share their methodology with you. Heck, we're at school. We're in an educational setting. These young individuals, and some not traditionally young, we're teaching them how to properly do things. So I think getting a student to explain their process, I think that's perfectly acceptable within the realm of a class. Now, the verbal sharing, oftentimes, I mean, people get stressed out. So I think talking with them away from the class, making it maybe a private conversation is good, but also classroom conversations where students are like in roundtable discussions can be really good methods to do too.
Yeah, I'd have to
Roundtable.
agree with you.
Absolutely.
I think that it's perfectly acceptable to say, you know, you miss the student learning outcomes, or this voice doesn't sound like your own, or my spidey sense is tingling. We always revert to that, you know, this just doesn't seem like what my student would write. Um, and then just asking them, and I like how you say explain the process, because I default to saying interrogate their process. No, no, no. Let's get out of the academia speak. Let's use more friendly language and just say, you know, how'd you arrive at this? And how'd you brainstorm? And how'd you put this together? I think those are all perfectly acceptable. Min has added a note to each assignment, something along the lines of be prepared to meet with me one-on-one to discuss your work if needed. I think that's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we've already mentioned putting this in the syllabus. What else can we do to set clear expectations and provide that AI education?
I mean, day one, policy statement, syllabus statement, syllabus statement, syllabus statement. What is acceptable versus what is not acceptable. I don't think it's right to bring a student up on academic integrity charges if we haven't been clear in what we expect. And I brought it up a second ago. Even this includes note taking. If you have not addressed what's an expectation, maybe in regards to note taking, or if that cannot be interpreted through the policy in the syllabus statement, we need to address it, because I don't think that would be right to go after a student if they used an AI platform to better arrange their notes in a more easier to read format.
Well,
But
I think
go
it's
ahead.
also becoming a useful study tool if a student puts their notes into an AI and says, do these notes make sense? Is there a gap in my notes? Or, you know, I know in science, like in chemistry, we're teaching them a whole new vocabulary. They're hearing words they've never heard before, and maybe they don't know what it means to decant a precipitate, you know, and so they can use AI to build that up. I could imagine myself as an undergraduate taking full use of this to fix my notes and make better notes using the AI.
I mean, we're preparing students for a world that's already fully accepted AI, and we're playing catch up and trying to maintain our dignity and values. But I mean, our primary goal is to prepare them for this world where they're going to need to be AI literate and competent with its use. Okay, so discussing AI in class. The first key to getting ahead of AI is to actively use it. I think I could see in a classroom scenario where you, on the board, you prompt an AI, and then you go through its output to talk about maybe the biases that is contained in it, how it applies to the class, how it applies to the student learning outcomes. But first and foremost, we need to actively discuss it and actively use it. And to know its limitations. The only way that we can get to know its limitations and its blind spots is to use it and talk about it. When it's that mysterious, what I like to call God thing that seems to be able to do so many amazing things, that's not a good place to be. We need to understand that it is merely a tool made by men and other people, not just mankind, humanity. Teaching critical evaluation skills. We need, I mean, this is common sense, gen ed type stuff to assess, help students learn to assess the accuracy, reliability, and bias of AI generated content. These AI platforms are trained on what? We don't know. It's kept proprietary, private knowledge for the most part. So outputs will vary depending on the materials that they've been trained on. We need to encourage reflections. We need to talk to students, and we need to ask them to reflect on how they're using AI in their studies and how it's impacting their learning. and model ethical AI use. Again, using it in class and showing them how it can be used as a powerful tool and not just a shortcut to offload our thinking and to take the easy way out.
Right. And I think we also need to do, again, going back to simple study skills, retrieval practice. It's uncomfortable, but flashcards work, and if you can't speak on a topic fluently without the AI in front of you, maybe you're not ready for the exam. And, we set these clear expectations. We provide the AI education needed to accomplish the AI goals within the class. But sometimes, no matter how much of this we do, we really need to go back and think about, okay, what assignments are these students continually offloading to the AI? Discussion board posts seem to be one of those that continually get offloaded to the AI. And I think that's perhaps because students feel it's very low in its perceived value. And I hate to talk about killing off our darlings, but sometimes we need to ask ourselves, does this assignment still make sense in light of what AI can do? Are my students perceiving the value? Do we need to retool this assignment or tweak it slightly so that it's accomplished the intended learning outcomes? Would it benefit from you simply communicating to the students why you value them having that particular learning experience? Another one, if your assignment is super easy, copy pastable, then maybe we need to redesign it to require a personal experience. Students will still try to AI it. And you'll see as they copy paste that the AI will say, well, as an AI, I don't have a personal experience, but I could imagine it to be. Okay, so it's not going to prevent all of this, but if we tie it to a personal experience, if we tie it to a location or time or place that's hyper local, even if you tie it to like course specific information. I've got a professor who's doing this very successfully right now in an anthropology course where if you are not up to date with the latest in anthropology, according to what he is teaching, the AIs are reaching back and finding kind of old and outdated information that's been proven inaccurate since then. And then we've always got these treasure trove of active learning experiences to draw from, where we've got students rolling up their sleeves and getting their hands dirty, metaphorically, in classes and working together to arrive at a desired outcome. And then I think another trend we're really seeing with all of the AI work is that we're shifting from a purely product-oriented pedagogy to a process-based pedagogy. And for those of you that follow Jason Gulia, either on his Substack or on LinkedIn, I check in with Jason daily on LinkedIn because he's been very verbose about switching to a process-based pedagogy where you're looking at the process. Let's talk to students about how'd their brainstorming go. How do we make an annotated bibliography? How do we annotate a work? Those are valuable skills. Can we submit a draft? Can we talk about how AI helped take that draft to a polished product? Can we peer review? Peer review since COVID has been kind of rough in my experience. I asked our first group of students that had like the middle of their high school experience gutted by COVID to do a peer review, and they were paralyzed by the idea of doing that. They either had these keyboard warriors who eviscerated them because, hey, I'm never going to see this person in real life, or they did, looks fine, and didn't offer any helpful comments. We can make the revision process, the reflection process, or other checkpoints gradable landmarks in this process, because ultimately, I think teaching the process lends such a richer landscape rather than just assessing a final research paper. And so this process-based pedagogy, I haven't seen any one work or one book or one manuscript that really talks about how we switch to this process. I am seeing a lot of information talking about in this process-based pedagogical approach, maybe we need to talk about project-based learning or ungrading or other alternative methods of grading. And I'll drop that name in the chat here in a second. But maybe we need to rethink those assignments if they are particularly susceptible to Gen AI. And maybe as a bonus thought, we talk about, well, what if my class was the class that teaches students how not to over-rely on AI? And it just becomes part of the vernacular right alongside teaching research skills or teaching lab safety. I mean, to me, that's a beautiful thought. I always hated the lab safety talks, but they're so critically necessary. Maybe this becomes one of those critically necessary discussions. So Dan, faculty suspect cheating. Now what?
So we've put our expectations, our policies in the course syllabus. We've tried to educate our students about AI. Maybe you've intervened in a unofficial, low-stakes conversation because you've noticed some questionable things on your students' submitted work. But yet you still see overuse, some type of misuse of AI, despite your best efforts. What happens then? I think it is important to not be punitive immediately. I think the initial outreach to students, the friendly conversations, I think that's a great way to start. But if the student clearly is not showing any desire to improve, then what happens next? And I think at its core, we need to think, keep this educational, keep this learning, keep this a growth-oriented exchange and interaction. Once we determine, I navigate these conversations quite regularly. And I can tell you that how we frame it and how we set the tone for this conversation is key, because you can turn a student off very quickly by how you choose to go about addressing this.
So
before you jump, go
we're
ahead.
really short on time, Dan. Do you want to just give us the Cliff Note versions on some of these?
Yes. Bell Hooks is a wonderful, wonderful scholar, philosopher who believed in an engaged pedagogy, which means you're not a teacher as a Pez dispenser of knowledge, giving your Pez's of knowledge to the students. It's a co-educational exchange. We're all educators and we're all students in the classroom, and we all have equal parts and our experiences matter. And I think that's a good way to reduce this over-reliance and misuse of AI. When a student feels connected to the class, to the learning goals, they're going to be less likely to utilize AI in a dishonest way. Preparing for the conversation, it is key to gather evidence from the get-go. You need to keep a ledger going, particularly when you suspect things. It will come in handy if you have to file an official report. And we also need to set a positive tone. We have to be don't criticize, don't accuse, get their input, try to understand where they're coming from and why they're doing it. And you may say, well, what about apathy? What if I get I don't care, whatever. Try your best to explain why that is a bad idea. And if sometimes it can be a lost cause if people aren't motivated, dedicated, and connected to the importance of their education. But it's important to set a positive tone and plan the meeting. I think a values affirmation is key. Why are you here? Why are we offloading our cognitive abilities to an AI? Rhetorical listening. Most of the time, you just listen. You don't have to make any statements or opinions. Just listen to them. Try to understand. People love sharing about themselves. And I think rhetorical listening in this type of interaction is key, because you may learn, hey, there's more going on than just wanting to game the system to make good grades. There's a lot going on in people's lives that sometimes we don't always consider, whether that's illness, familial responsibilities, social expectations, and that type of thing. But we need to be neutral. We need to be neutral and nice, I think, is a great way, because they're just going to clam up if we're not trying to be as supportive as possible to understand this. And I think too, kind of builds that, oh, this person cares. They're not just like yelling at me and making me scared of them. Because students are already scared of a lot of you faculty people, whether you realize it or not. It's just, for a young person, it can be an overwhelming process. Additional meeting tips: safe environment. Safe environment doesn't mean free of uncomfortable topics. We have to discuss the hard things sometimes. And a safe space just means that that student should feel free and open to share with you, and you should feel free to share with them. And again, open-ended questions, open-ended questions. What resources did you use for this project? Can you walk me through your process? And again, listen actively, pay attention, allow the student to respond and provide their perspective. Don't try to jump in when they're trying to explain something to you. Try to show some empathy. Not everybody thinks empathy is a character misgiving in 2025. Okay.
Yeah, Dan, I think that's a really good point, because these hard conversations don't have to be mean conversations. And one of the last times I was on Twitter before I closed that profile down, I saw this quote from Amy Fast, who's a principal, and I think she summarizes very well what we were trying to convey today, in that real accountability isn't a gotcha, it's an I see you. So I did drop a link to our resources in the chat. I've got an entire syllabus template that houses all of our policies. I think what I will do is I will either upload this as a resource to send out with the email summarizing this at the end, and I will send that link. But one way or another, I will get you some of these good syllabus policies, at least as a building block to get you all started. Everybody that registered today will get a link to the recording. And I just want to implore you all, I appreciate that you have come today. And if you're just getting started with AI, welcome. We can stay one step ahead. You want to locate your AI people, see who's actively playing with AI, get advice from them, but also play with AI yourself. Be familiar with the downsides of AI use. As Dan mentioned, know your students' writing, try to do some writing in class, and use some formative assessments and scaffolding. Emphasizing these learning processes over final products will help us to catch over-reliance early. And so if anybody has any final questions before we call this a day, we've got a little time that Dan and I can answer some questions. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you at future AI programming, and thank you all for your time and attention today.